Hello once again everyone, and welcome back to our Going Posta series. So last time we worked on Porta di Ferro. Today we're going to be tackling Posta di Donna, specifically Posta di Donna Destreza, the right guard of the lady. And the idea here is going to be, you can also hear this occasionally referred to as Posta di Donna Soprana, or the high guard of the lady, because there are actually two forms of Posta di Donna. Three, technically. You'll see it sometimes held just at the shoulder, at which point it is still referred to as Posta di Donna. You will also see it held up here, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And then, of course, later we'll be talking about sinistra and what properties that gets. But for now, we're going to be talking about high on your right side. So first off, what does this actually get you? Why not just stand here? Well, simple fact is that if you pull your sword up higher, regardless of how you get it there, you're going to get more gravity on your side. We're combining this with a volta stable, which is keeping us a little bit further back and really just priming our hips. So this way, when we uncurl, we get a ton of cut power without necessarily needing to step forward. This is why it is labeled as one of the pulsatava techniques, one of the powerful techniques, as from this I can frankly get a lot more juice than we usually use it for. And this is an important thing with this guard, more so than the others, is you have, pardon my language, a lot of whoop ass at your disposal. And if you choose to use it, you can get a lot out of it. So you really need to make sure that this is one that you practice and use to its effectiveness, but not to the point that it is malicious. And I really stress that quite a bit. But the main attribute directly comes off of that. That being that from here, Fiore says that I may use my crushing blows to counter all the other guards. Now we're not talking about counter the guards as in just, it's a hard counter. What we're talking about is from the majority of his posta, if he wants to defend himself, if he wants to make a cover, he will be moving into posta longa, right? So putting his sword out here, where his left foot remains forward, even if he does bring his right foot forward, that doesn't actually necessarily matter all that much. But bringing his guard forward to protect himself. This means that he puts himself in a very strong centralized position. If I were to try and cut at it from my shoulder, yes, maybe I can get in, but he's pretty strong against it. If I were to try to cut at him from another guard, I can play angles, sure, but just raw ability to crumble whatever he throws at me, I'm going to need to use this guy. So slowly we'll show what that looks like at first. So the idea is he's currently in Porta di Ferro. What he's looking to do is as my cut comes in, he is looking to just cover himself, right? That's all he's looking to do. He wants to get my sword offline, his sword is mostly online, so that he will then have the opportunity to follow up with whatever he sees fit, or at the very least, I can't follow up immediately. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to go ahead and now put in the rest of this power. So I'm lined up like where it wants me to be. I start my cut. I've got it, right? So here, it may not look like it a ton from your angle, but his sword point is a solid about, honestly, a foot offline. Mine is online, and I didn't put much more into it than my hip turn. This is because in the process of him trying to come to this cover, I am directly intercepting his flats from above. Now this cut you want to make relatively tight. I don't want this to be a baseball swing. What I want is from here, it is directed directly over my shoulder and down to my center. This is going to allow me to either catch his flat, which will expulse his sword, or I will shear down his, not quite edge, but if you look on my sword, for example, you'll see how there is some geometry going on there, right? Where I've got kind of this raised part of the flat. Any sort of sword, even as a fuller, will have that extra raise. That's what you want to be shearing down, as it quite literally just skips his off to the side. Both of these properties work A-OK. You'll usually get one or the other. But, once again, he tries to make his cover. I've just got him, and I haven't even put my back foot into it. As long as I am extending, I will beat him here. From there, I may execute whatever technique I wish. So, for example, I could then move through any of the long plays you've seen already, or alternatively, I can use my right foot in this. Now, Fiore doesn't describe stepping forward with your right foot initially, but it can be assumed you can do so. So if I were to do so, one, I'm going to most likely enter into the close range game, but two, I get even more power. And I'm all the way over here, right? My sword point didn't hit his head there because I was moving offline and so it adjusted, but point being at this point, I'm in a great position to follow up with kind of whatever I want. Jake is kind of SOL. And that's not particularly difficult to do. All I do is I just extend and cut out, and right about here, as I would normally be finishing, all I'm doing is then just passing naturally off of it, and I will end up doing a mezza volta, which brings me offline with him. Overall, pretty simplistic. I'll show it one more time with the passing step. No problem whatsoever. From there, I may do whatever I feel like doing. Just kind of depends upon what you get. But that's the first aspect, is that I can crush other guards. So let's look at some others. So for example, if he's in Finestra, right? Now he gets to make a choice here. He could try and counter thrust me, or he can just try and make his cover. Really, it ends the same either way, right? If I know that he's someone that's going to try and counter thrust me, and this is more my thought on it, if I know he's going to try and counter thrust me, it's better for me to go ahead and step to the side, because that way I'm basically doing the exchange of points. If I know he's someone that's just going to cover, then I can do as I've already done. So first, he's someone who's just going to cover. Even easier, right? Because he's trying to spiral out from above, meaning that I can beat him on leverage. If I know someone who's going to try and thrust me as I do it, now I've broken the point, and all the wonderfulness happens. That's just a tactical decision, mind you, and that's something that I would do. Fiore never describes it. But another example, let's say he is in Posta himself, but he's not in the high version. He's just at his shoulder. Okay, these are relatively similar. Can I still beat him on strength? Yes. The reason I can is because I still have that gravity on my side. So even if he makes his cover, right, it's a little less, but it's still there. I still have a better chance than he does. And so as such, you can get a lot out of this just by countering whatever they throw. So sometimes this can be used as a threat. Other times this can just be used if you know someone is just going to cover, then try to work from there. You can blow through their potential guards. But again, focus on what is effective. I could put a lot more strength into this, but that is bonus. I don't need to use it. Either way. So now let's talk about the next thing Fiore says to do. The next thing Fiore says you can do out of this guard is going to be the exchange of points. So we talked about that before when we went over Posta di Ferro. So what's going to happen here is he's going to just briefly retread ground, he's going to be coming forward with a thrust of some kind, right? Usually that's going to be out one of his point forward guards, so you could go out Posta Longa, Posta Breve, Dente del Gingaro, or Posta Finestra. All these are totally fine. The point is that a thrust is coming at me, and my best way of dealing with it is number one, stepping offline, number two, putting my point into him, and number three, keeping my hands low, and we literally exchange points. Now, when I did out of Posta di Ferro, it wasn't that complicated for me to do. I just quite literally put my sword on top of his while I stepped out to the side. Here, my tip isn't even nearly online. It's actually further offline. So what do I need to make sure I'm going to do? Well, from here, I'm going to be moving down and stepping out in a manner not dissimilar to the way that I passed forward to crush his guard when he was trying to counter thrust me earlier. So once again, I'm going to be bringing my arms down and just stepping out to the side. Now that one turned into more of a cut because of our distance, but it's still the exchange of points. The thing you want to focus on doing is bringing from here tight, basically into Posta Breve, right? And as you get there, step offline, and your tip will pretty much just go where it needs to go. So here's that again. Now in this case, I ended up overbinding. No worries, from here I've broken the point. You can turn into other things. You notice that when it comes to thrust, the exchange of points and the breaking of the point kind of end up relatively similar. This is a good thing. But that's going to be how to exchange points. Nothing too complicated. Personally, I don't like doing it very much out of this guard, but it is something you can do. And certainly, it's a little bit less obvious than trying to break the point, which is another tactical decision. Fiore doesn't describe doing the breaking of point out of here. He never says it. But that's not to say you couldn't. I just proved you can. An important thing to remember, though, is that this is very obvious in that you are about to put a lot of strength into whatever is in front of you. So a savvy person very well may try to be cagey with their point. So for example, let's have you go up into Posta di Donna. Okay? Yeah. So he's up there. I know that he is going to try and either break this point or exchange points. Based upon where he is, my base assumption, mind you, in this situation we're assuming I don't know anything about Jake, would be, okay, he's probably going to try and break my point because he's got all the power to do so. Which means that it's very easy for me to be live with my point, and he's in a very bad situation. So this is just tinfoil hats on for a moment. I think the reason Fiore emphasizes the exchange of points instead is because it's less obvious, and thus will probably keep you safer in the long run, as it's less predictable. But I digress. The final thing that Fiore says we can do is going to be a bit of a fun one. He says that from this position, we may advance our front foot a little off the line and then pass with our rear foot to get to a position wherein our opponent is completely unprotected. So what this is going to be basically a really big passing offline step. So there's a couple things this could be. So firstly, you could advance your front foot off the line this way, but the problem is you will then be springing into his sword most often, which is not a very good thing. You could advance the foot offline this way, then spring that way, but you won't cover nearly as much distance. So personally, I believe this to be, I'm taking my left foot and slightly cross-stepping. Not huge, just a little bit off the line, right? So I'm already open, and I'm just bringing it across. So to show on the line itself, I'm here. I'm pretty much just bringing the ball of my foot just to center. Now what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to go ahead and spring hard off of that. So I'm going to bring my foot out, and then just step as far as I can. Which, as you see, because of the way he wants to cover, he has to cross himself. Now, this is where an important thing comes up. If he's someone that's going to move as he covers, so just for example, he's tornareing, or he could pass forward, either way is completely legitimate, he's brought his back foot up in some way to gain himself distance, he might escape this. But if he is someone that's just going to put the sword betwixt me and him, this is fantastic. Because what ends up happening is he crosses over himself with his body. Now, I may not get to a place where he's completely undefended, but he can no longer put any leverage on this side. He's out of options. The only thing he could do to achieve that in this situation would be to pass forward into it, but that's a long way to go. As such, he is left pretty much on the back foot for the moment, and as long as I don't muck up my follow-up, I have a decent chance of getting it. So here's that again. I'm here, I'm going to advance my foot a little off the line, spring, and I'm in a great position to then follow through with whatever I see fit. Now, I am personally keeping a little bit farther away from him. I think you could also spring deeper into him if you wanted to. The biggest thing is that regardless of how this finishes, right, even if I do end up closer to him, I'm still in a fantastic position, especially if I choose to enter into the close range here because the leg is right there. You have a ton of options is what I'm saying. But we'll switch sides on that one real quick just to show you guys, and then we'll be done. So, we're here. I'm going to advance my foot a little off the line. Spring. As you can see, he is now basically facing toward the camera, but he's all sorts of crossed up. The only way for him to really defend himself here, especially if I'm threatening that tip, is to expose his hand, which is, again, just feeding into the long-range plays that you already know. But, thank you very much, Jake. Those are the actions that are going to be described for Posta, Donna, Destreza. All in all, a very powerful guard, but also a very, not necessarily predictable, but most times when people take it, they are static with it. Make sure that it's something you're moving into and through quite efficiently, as otherwise what's going to happen is you're sitting there and you're waiting to use all this power, they will choose to be cagey. In fact, let me show you that real quick. I have my gloves off, so I got to do it right. My personal recommendation for how to take this position, since this is not a position you want to wait in, would be we're out at our maximum distance. If I am going to choose to use it, I want to come up into it, and then from there go. So he went to make his cover, that'd be my signal to go. There are a couple different ways you can do this. You can plant the front foot and lean back. You can scoop into it, or you can plant, step out. All these are perfectly wonderful ways to get into this guard. Whatever one strikes your fancy, I find everyone has a preference. But above all else, I want to be making sure that I'm moving into it real quick, getting whatever it will give me, and if it's not giving me something, so for example, I pop into it and he looks way too confident for my liking, I might as well go ahead and move into something else, right? It's very easy to transition into all the other guards from this position, and you can get a lot out of it. But all in all, that's enough of me blabbing. Hopefully this was of assistance to you all, and we will go over some other postas another time.